All right, on-ramps, we are on page 92 of the packet, and we are looking at exploration 4.3.4. I want you guys to try 1 through 5 in your groups, work together, but I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of number 6 and maybe one like number 9. So I'll do number 6 and number 9, and you guys can follow my lead. So we are going to graph these functions. Notice it says without a calculator, and then it says label both axes with important values. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is the difference between our cosine graphs and our sine graphs. So you see how we have 2 cosine graphs, 3 sine examples. I'm going to go ahead and do 1 cosine and 1 sine. That way you guys can take a look at the difference. And I'm going to show you just kind of here on this piece of paper. So first I'll start off with just the regular cosine graph. Okay, so cosine, if we have our x and y axis, okay, the main points that I want to graph are 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And that's because if we think about the unit circle, these are the main 4 points on the circle. So here is 0 and 2 pi, and that coordinate is 1, 0. This one is 0, 1, negative 1, 0, and 0, negative 1. So if I'm doing cosine, first of all, the maximum is going to be 1 and the minimum is going to be negative 1. If I'm thinking about at 0 degrees on the unit circle, that coordinate of cosine is the x coordinate, which is 1. So I'm going to have a point here at 0, 1. At pi over 2, that x coordinate is 0. At pi, it's negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, it's 0. And then back at 2 pi, the x coordinate is 1. So this is my curve for cosine. Okay, and that's supposed to be connecting kind of cleaner there. So this is what we call one period of cosine. So 1 period starts at 0 and ends at 2 pi. So we're going to say 1 period is equal to 2 pi radians. Okay, so we've got 1 period of cosine. I'm going to do 1 period of sine, and then I'm going to show you how to do the transformations like the ones in our exploration. So let's do sine really quickly. Y equals sine of x. And let's go with this. I'm going to do the same points, which are 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, don't forget the maximum is 1 and the minimum is negative 1. So this time for sine, we're looking at the y coordinates. So at 0 degrees, the y coordinate is 0. At pi over 2, the y coordinate is 1. At pi, the coordinate for the y value is 0 again. 3 pi over 2 is negative 1, and 2 pi is 0. And then we're going to create the curve like so. There it is. Okay, so there is 1 period of sine. So we need to know the difference between cosine and sine, where they begin. So one starts at the origin, where the other one starts at 0, 1. And then showing the motion of the curve. Okay, so this is something that we need to have kind of like in the back of our minds so that we can get started on the transformation. There's a lot of different pieces of information that I'm going to talk about when I graph this first example. So here's number 6. Number 6 on our exploration is 4 f of x equals 4 plus plus 3 cosine pi over 6, and then in parentheses x minus 2. Okay, so now that I have that one written down, I'm going to show you guys how to do this problem. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have kind of like 3 lines. So I'm going to have basically 3 dashed lines. So I'm going to do one here, I'll do one here, and I'm going to do one more here. These 3 dashed lines are evenly spaced. Okay. After I do that, then I'm going to start off with the k value. So let me remind you, we have our transformation. I'm going to write it here at the top, but we're going to have y equals a and then cosine b x minus h plus k. So if you recall, we talked about transformations earlier in this year, but we also had them in Algebra 2. A is kind of like our vertical stretch or compression. Our B represents our horizontal component. The H is the horizontal shift, and the K is the vertical shift. So in this example here, the K, they threw the K out in the front. So our K value is actually 4. Okay, now the K value, is always called the sinusoidal axis. Sinusoidal axis. And it's kind of a weird word, sinusoidal. But this K value represents the middle. So this K value is going to be the number 4, because that's our K value. So 4 is our sinusoidal axis. Then we have something called the amplitude. So the number in front of the trig function cosine, that's our A value. And A is our amplitude. So our amplitude is 3. So I'm going to put A is our amplitude. Okay. And what that represents is we basically have to go the distance 3 up from the middle graph, the sinusoidal axis. So up 3 would be 7, and then down 3 would be 1. Okay, and that's what we have so far. That's going to be up 3, down 3. Now I'm going to go ahead and create an x and y axis. So I'm going to create my y-axis, that's just my vertical axis. And then my x-axis, well, 0 would be right here. So this is at 0 right there. So here's my x-axis and my y-axis. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is this right here represents our b value. And the b value will be part of our period. So we have something called the period. And if you recall, the period for these graphs were 2 pi, because that's where it started and that's where it finished. So we have a formula for period. It's 2 pi over the b value, okay? So if you take a look, the b value is pi over 6. So if we did 2 pi divided by pi over 6, well, that's the same thing as multiplying 6 over pi, multiplied by the reciprocal. That's going to be 12. So the period is 12 units for this graph, okay? Now, for all the graphs, I like to have 5 tick marks. So do you see how we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tick marks? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 12, and I got to look at the spaces between. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something called tick width. And that's going to be your period divided by 4. So in this case, it's 12 divided by 4, which equals 3. Okay? And I know there's a lot of writing here and a lot of different information, but tick width is always the period divided by 4. So we need that formula. And of course, period is 2 pi over the b value. So if I want to do my tick width. In this case, the period was 12, so I divide by 4 and I got 3. So what I'm gonna do with that, well, first I'm gonna have another set, I'm gonna start over here. So I'm gonna have 5 tick marks. So the first tick mark, the second tick mark, the third tick mark, the fourth tick mark, and last but not least, the 5th tick mark. Okay? The first tick mark is actually always gonna be our H value. So if you take a look here, remember the H value is inside, and that one, you see how it says a -2, but you can't trust the H, though that actually means it's going to the right 2. So your first tick mark is always gonna be your H value, and in this case, it's 2. It's X minus H, so in this case, it's 2. Then we're gonna add the tick width. So 2 plus 3 gives us 5. 5 plus 3 gives us 8. 8 plus 3 is 11, and 11 plus 3 is 14. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna start off at 2, then we're gonna go to 5, then we're gonna go to 8, then we're gonna go to 11, and last but not least, we're gonna go to 14. All right, so here are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tick marks. And last but not least, after we have our tick marks, then we look at the graph we're trying to graph, which is cosine. Cosine, remember, starts at the top part, the maximum. So first tick mark is 2. So at 2, we're going to start at the maximum, which in this case is 7. And then we're going to follow the motion. We're going to go down to the middle, down to the min, up to the middle, up to the max. So 5 would be down to the middle, which is 4. 8 down to the min, 11 back to the middle, and 14 up to the max. And after you've created those points, you're going to connect the points. And then there you have it. That is 1 period of cosine. And that's how you do it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here, but I'm going to try one more example. I'm going to get a better pen because this pen is not very good. But there's a lot of pieces of information you need. You need the tick width, you need the period formula, the K value, and the amplitude. And then from there, we're going to create our tick marks and create the curve. All right.